Hey everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State and beyond. Today, me and Ryan are going to talk about some of the birding tech that we've been testing out and just some of the stuff that exists. So, Ryan, how you doing? What's the first piece of tech you'd like to talk about?
Well, I think just we should talk about the whole thing because birding is something that's pretty simple in and of itself. You don't need anything actually to go out there and look at some birds. You can look at them out your window. But I would say in the last handful of years, maybe the last 4 to 5, there's been a boom of gadgets and things that change the way that people view birds, change the way that people go about bird watching and birding in general. So there's a lot going on right now that it seems just recently has occurred.
Yeah, let's start with kind of some basic backyard stuff. So we had the big smart bird feeder boom. So basically a bird feeder you put out. It connects to your phone so you can watch what's going on in the bird feeder from your home, which to me, that's pretty normal now. But I mean, that was a pretty revolutionary thing when it came out, and
Well,
there's
I think
still new ones
also
being
we
designed.
we think it's super normal too because we've tested out tons of them. So many companies have reached out to us to test their smart bird feeders. We've gotten our hands on a lot of them. It's just routine now. It's another smart bird feeder request. So it's for us, I think we're kind of at the forefront of that. I think there's still people out there that go, "Oh, wow, that's really cool." And I think it's funny too because we've given some of these to people that we know and they do get kind of hooked on watching the birds in their yard. So one of our friends, we set up, or Derek set up a bird feeder at his house recently, and his daughter loves birds. I think she's only a couple years old.
She's two. She calls them tweet tweets. So we named
Yes.
it the tweet tweet cam.
Yes, so she loves watching the birds, and now about once or twice a week, this friend reaches out to us asking what this bird species is that's showing up at his feeder. And it's funny because it's usually a common one. I think the last one he sent me, it was just a chickadee that looked like it got caught in the rain.
I got a house
And
sparrow.
yeah, you got a house sparrow. Well, he's
Yeah.
like, "What's this?" And I was like, "Oh, that's black-capped chickadee." And he's like, "Oh, wow, it looked pretty gnarly."
Yeah, I saw that one. That was pretty gnarly. So we had the smart bird feeders, and then
Well, I think before we move on from that, I think that we should talk about the one thing that we usually hear from stuff that advances the way that people watch birds and identify birds is it somehow diluting the hobby? Because we've
mm,
heard this from, people talking about Merlin. We've heard it from people talking about other stuff. And I think we should just kind of, with all these items, does the smart bird feeder somehow dilute the hobby of viewing birds?
I'm gonna go absolutely not with that one because that's not an ex like you can still watch the bird feeder it's on its own. It's just providing you some extra ways of viewing it. I think the AI is definitely questionable, and I mean all of them. It's been questionable. There hasn't been one where like the AI is perfect at trying to identify the birds. Sometimes they try to identify the birds for you. So I feel like I'd be more worried about that. But just the aspect of being able to watch a bird feeder from your phone, I don't think that's diluting the hobby at all. I think it's adding a little extra enjoyment and getting more people involved.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. I think it's pretty cool to be able to see the birds coming and just see kind of what's going on in your yard. It's an interesting way to do that. And I think a lot of people are really into their yard in general. Oh, there's a new thing that popped up in my yard. There's a new animal. There's a new plant. I think a lot of people like to know what's going on, and this really opens that window, literally and metaphorically.
And it kind of goes along with the live cams. You can see the feeders from across the world, or in some of the apps, you can see other people's smart bird feeders. You can look at different species in different places. So it's just pretty cool to be able to have that ability.
Well, before we move on to what's the next step for that product? How is it improved? How do they make it better? Where do they go from there?
So there's definitely things within the feeder setup, like of a smart bird feeder, that can be improved upon. So, and you're definitely having different ones come in with one major thing they're working on. So we tested one that was the big thing was it was 4K, like a 4K smart bird feeder. Then you have
Caught
the
in
ones that
4K?
are, oh, they're metal. Yeah, caught in 4K. They're metal smart bird feeders, or they're, has the best AI, or so they're all kind of trying to pick one thing to be like, oh, ours has this, which makes it better. So I think those are going to kind of evolve within each company. Like they're all going to have kind of their unique product. I think the next step, I think, with that kind of technology is what I was going to talk about, which is the smart nest boxes. So you kind of move from watching the birds eat to watching the birds nest. So the
Well, I
idea
think
behind
first we
those,
I think we have to pause for a second though and talk about some of the more niche smart bird feeders. Sorry, I keep pulling it back to
Yeah,
the
I feel
smart
like you
bird feeders.
really don't want to
I
talk
can
about the
tell
nest
you
boxes.
really want to go move on, and I really want to rein it back in a little bit because there's also smart hummingbird feeders.
That's
So
true.
that's
Yeah.
another kind of product that they've come out with, and that also has some of its own flaws. And it works great, other than the fact that since it's a hummingbird feeder, it's usually hanging from something and it sways, and therefore it usually causes the camera to go and act as if there is an animal at the feeder because it detects motion. And in reality, you're just getting a bunch of clips of nothing at your feeder. But that's
Yep.
a cool product. And if you can find a way to stabilize it, it really helps. But I did want to mention too, I think the next step for those smart bird feeders, making materials that are going to last longer. So people are on the right track with the bamboo, the smart bird feeders that are made of metal. And I think also the better AI, getting AI to work better in those bird feeders.
I'm not convinced the AI is ever going to be perfect because it really is based on the quality of the image you get. And sometimes these are just, I guess you could make it better by not having it identify things as often because they'll take some wild stabs from a really bad
Passenger
image.
pigeon, the passenger
Yeah, we
pigeon
got one that
incident.
said there was a passenger pigeon at the feeder, and we're like, why is that even in the AI database? Like, why is that an
Yeah,
option?
yeah. Why is that an option? But I think that they're bent on making that a thing because it's
The
been such
AI.
a
It's a
yeah,
thing to
it's
market. So
such a point that they've been marketing. Yeah,
they can
well,
say, oh,
everything,
it identifies
identify
this
the
number of
bird.
species. Yeah.
You
But
get it.
I
You
will
get
say
where I'm coming
one
from.
of the companies, well, I guess I could say, I did the NetView smart hummingbird feeder, and they said they were working on a way to make it so it doesn't swing to kind of prevent it from sending those erroneous notifications. I don't know where they're at with that or if they're gonna do anything with it or if they're just looking into it. But it is kind of cool when you review a product and they're like, oh, based on your recommendations, we changed, this aspect of it or whatever. It's kind of cool.
Would you say that we're at the forefront of bird products?
It feels like it. I mean, think we've done probably the most smart bird feeder reviews on
I think I
YouTube.
said this to you the other day. I think you're the most qualified person to talk about bird
It's
feeding,
possible.
bird nesting products that exists in the world right now.
It was not something that I was like, yeah, I want to do that, but people just kept sending them. They're like offering to send them. I'm like, yeah, I'll review that.
They're
I'll
just like,
review that one.
please take it. We want you to have it.
Once when they started, there's one company that I think is providing a bunch of the bodies, like different companies. So they're reaching out and being like, hey, you want to make a smart bird feeder? And then they're all similar. And that's kind of when I was like, all right, let's be more picky about which ones we review because they all
Right. I'm actually
started
going to be
being
a
the
little more
same.
specific on that. The way it essentially works is there are products out there that you can buy the base product and then it has customizable options. And so what happened is a lot of companies, especially overseas, took note of this, started buying up the camera bodies with the differences that they could customize a little bit. So like you were saying, we got a bunch of, it's the same, it has the same
And then a
concept,
random
has the
name
same
on it.
color. Yeah, exactly. And that's just a different name slapped on it. There was even the base company reached out to us and asked if we wanted to make our own smart bird feeder brand, but it would have just been the same as everybody else's. So we didn't feel like that was something worth doing.
Well, yeah, and there were issues with those as well, where it was like, yeah, I don't want to really slap a name on that. If we did ever make a smart bird feeder, it would have to take into consideration everything that I've learned from the reviews. So it'd be pretty specific build on there. But I feel like if there was a company that wanted to work with us on that, like making one from the ground up, we could probably make like the best one.
Yeah, yeah, we could probably do it. We know
It's
what things
it's a
work the
bird
best.
feeder and a hummingbird feeder and a bird bath all in one.
Wow. Well, now we can
No, it
move
wouldn't
on.
be that. It wouldn't be that.
We can move on.
Um, so we got the smart bird houses, which you can hook it up and then watch the birds nesting, which I thought was super cool. We did our first one last year. Green Backyard sent us one. It was a Wi-Fi bird box with camera, and we had that family of house runs, and I was really invested in it, just watching them grow up. And we have some videos doing kind of it has a little clip from every day, but it was really, really neat to from the first stick they put in the box, and it was almost immediate. We put it up, and then I think later the same day wrens were checking it out and then they started building the nest and it just gives you a look you would never see otherwise. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's the quintessential hidden view of something that you don't normally get to witness. I mean, especially because those species are cavity nesting. So other than literally opening up the box for a bluebird or something, you never know what's going on in there.
Yeah, and it is interesting because it's cool that you can do it with cavity nesters, but then I'm like, I wonder what it would look like to watch an Oriole raise its chicks because they have those like hanging, nests. So I
You
don't
got
know
to make a
exactly how
smart
you would do
hanging
that.
nest somehow.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. And then I'm thinking, what other cavity nesting species can we get? Because we really only seem to be successful with wrens.
The
We have
house
another
wrens
one
seem
from
very
Nephew.
willing. They seem very willing to nest in these nest
Yeah,
boxes.
yeah. We have another one from NetView that we're posting pieces from on our Instagram. They have 7 eggs and we're waiting for the eggs to hatch. And it's still really cool to watch, even though we, watched the family house runs last year. It's still fun to watch it this year. I think it'd be a great classroom project, especially if you have something where like possible predation is really limited. Like with the wrens, the box is up on a nice post. It's got the hole is too small for house sparrows, so theoretically they should be pretty safe. But it'd be really neat to have like a class and then watch the birds grow up. I guess one of the downsides is that they mostly are doing this in the summer. So, maybe summer school.
You'd have to retroactively just save all the images and act like it's real time when it's
Yeah.
not. Just pull the
Ah, that
wool
wouldn't
over
be
everyone's
right.
eyes. But I would say too that the smart bird feeders, by and large, seem, from what we've tested, that mostly they work pretty well. You've had some issues with some of them with connectivity problems, and there's stuff with Wi-Fi that happens. But the one that I'm testing right now, I haven't had any problems with the connection to it.
The
So
birdhouse.
the birdhouse, yeah. So if the connections and everything are good, it seems like they work pretty well. There's some bugs that need to be fixed, but you don't have one of those issues that's just kind of built into it, like the swing of the hummingbird feeder, like the AI problem. There's nothing in it that could go wrong that's going to routinely go wrong unless it has to do with internet connection, it seems.
Which are you talking about? Just regular smart bird feeders?
What do you mean?
Or just
I'm talking
smart
about the smart
products in
bird
general?
houses. I'm saying the
Oh, the
smart bird
birdhouses.
houses. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
saying the
the
smart
the
bird houses seem
connecting.
like they work better.
Well, so the smart bird feeders, they've had longer time on the market, so they actually should work the best. Like you should be able to buy one and have nothing go wrong with it. The smart bird houses, they're kind of newer. So I feel like I've encountered more bugs with trying to connect things or the software not working right or something going on with the product itself. So they're still working on it. But the longer these things are out, the more they should kind of fine tune those and hopefully iron it out. So when you buy one, you can be sure that it actually is going to work the way it is. But I think that's the smart bird product as far as feeders, and stuff like that, that I think is the coolest, the bird houses.
Yeah, so we have options for where we want to go next on this. And I think that at the start of the spring, it felt like the next big thing was thermal technology.
Sure. I got one more for you before we move on
Okay,
though.
well,
That
now you're reining me back in
I'm
now.
reining you back in. This is something we haven't tested, but I've been told that hopefully we'll get to try is a smart bird bath.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
So I don't know how you prevent the camera from just getting water on it all the
I was
time.
gonna say I'm picturing like a particularly plump mourning dove just splashing right in there and just waterlogging the camera.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see how that's all gonna work. But that's been something that's been talked about kind of as one of the next products. I haven't tested one yet, but it sure seems interesting. And then I also just wanted to talk about some of the other issues with the smart bird feeders. We talked about the AI. A lot of people don't like that many of them are plastic, so they can get chewed on. Squirrels will come do stuff. So the squirrel proofing is kind of on you, more or less. And then a lot of times the seed holders are pretty thin, so you're gonna be filling it a lot if you get a lot of birds at it. So those are just some of the
Hmm.
things. But you can watch our series about smart bird feeders. I did like an ultimate guide that goes through like the different categories of them too. So we have a ton of stuff if you can't get enough of the smart bird feeders.
If you're one of those people that can't get enough of the smart bird viewers, we were joking that we were gonna set up a ton of them in the yard. Just every
Yeah,
corner of the
just have
yard
like
has a smart bird feeder. It's just crazy.
which one's the favorite? Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Well, let's go to thermal technology now, because like I said, it seemed like at the beginning of the spring that was going to be the big thing. We got the chance to test out a couple of different thermal products. What did you think of them? Did they make an impact for the way that you birded?
So first of all, I think the thermal technology is really cool. It's been around more on like shows where they're looking for mammals, or even like Bigfoot shows. They try to use the thermal technology. But we had one that was I think like about an $800 one, and it worked okay. You could see heat, and it was a cool novelty. And then we haven't done the full review, but we tried the Zeiss DTI 4, I believe it was, and that one was just incredible. Like you could turn it on, and it looked like it was the day with how much definition you got.
Hmm.
And that one just kind of blew me away with how incredible it was and what you could all see. And I really wanted to get my hands on some of those thermals, and seeing the Zeiss and being able to use it really kind of like I feel like I really enjoyed when we were using it, but I don't necessarily miss it that we don't have it anymore, if that makes sense. Like it's not a product I see myself using like daily. But when we had it, every night I was looking out in the backyard, like, hey, are there rabbits around? Is there an owl? So I feel like it's something everyone should try at least once. With the high price tag, it's definitely not in everyone's budget, but it's super cool tech.
Yeah, I think you covered that pretty well. I looked through the $800 one first,
And that's not
and
cheap either. That's
right, it's
pretty
not cheap either.
pricey.
And I was looking through it and I was like, oh, this is really cool. You could see the killdeer. I remember we found a killdeer that was in a field that I could not see just with my eyes, but the thermal picked it out, which was really neat. And we were using that. And then I tried the Zeiss afterwards. And at first I thought, oh, the $800 one's great. Works perfect. What more could you want? And seeing the Zeiss, it was so detailed. It was really, really insane with how much detail there was. And we used it to look at woodcocks actually, which was pretty cool. That was a neat experience. But to the point that you made, it's not useful for everything. You can use it when stuff is sitting out, but if it's a, marsh bird that's in the cattails, you're really not going to be able to see even a heat signature with it
It's not
anyway.
X-ray
So
vision,
yeah,
unfortunately.
exactly. You're not going to go out there and suddenly find hundreds of new birds that you haven't seen before. But if it's nighttime and there's an owl somewhere around that's sitting up and you use it, then you'll be able to pick it out for whatever that's worth.
Well, I remember behind the woodcock, we picked out some deer in the field too that we couldn't see. It was like, oh, dang, there's tons of deer here. And then when we were in Ohio, they had some thermals as well, I think from different companies that worked pretty well to look for the woodcocks at night. And you saw tons of deer there too. It makes you feel a lot safer at night, in my opinion, because it feels like the view through it is like it looks like daytime basically with how much definition there is. You can look around and be like, oh, there's no, you know, people doing sketchy stuff here. There's no Sasquatches. So
No deer selling drugs.
yeah, thankfully.
Yeah, and we've used night vision products too. So we've had night vision monoculars and things of that nature. And those, work fairly well too. Obviously, you're getting more of a kind of black and white image as opposed to the heat signatures. So it is different. Um, we actually did a video recently about nocturnal bird calls. It was 5 nocturnal bird calls that you should know. And there's some images of the woodcocks with the nocturnal night vision too. So if you want to see what that looks like, well, I think we did a full review
We
on it
did a
as
full
well at
review,
some
yeah.
point. But if you wanted to see that in there, you could look at that video too if you want to check that out.
Yeah, really cool stuff to try. And I think I want to talk about the one we released the video on the most recently, which was the AX Vizio from Swarovski, which is about a $5,000 product, but it's the world's first quote unquote smart binocular. And so I think they debuted it at the Consumer Electronics Show, because I believe it's CES. But basically, the idea is you charge it, you turn it on, you can click a button where I will identify a bird for you and take pictures and things. And I know we used to talk about, oh, it'd be cool if the binoculars could take pictures for you. And now they can, and they can try to identify birds for you. And of course, it's kind of hit and miss with the identification because it's kind of just basing it off what you're able to give it. So if you give it a more clear view, it's going to give you a better ID. But it did sometimes ID things wrong. But it was really cool novelty to try out and test.
Yeah, we had fun with it for sure. And it was funny to kind of do a little, beat the robot technology thing. And it was, oh, I identified that before the binoculars did. And it's just like anything else that's supposed to identify things for you, is it's not always right. And it was cool though to be able to take a picture of something with binoculars, have it give an identification of what you think it was, and then you could go check anyway and do the identification yourself based on the picture you got. And there was a lot of people that were kind of hating on it in the comments, talking about how the price was too high, talking about how it was useless and how it was Somebody mentioned how it was basically degrading the hobby of birding by making it too easy for people if it works right to identify things. And I just thought it was a cool piece of technology. And I could see it having a purpose for sure in places like schools where you can take school groups out and they can use the binoculars and try to identify stuff in real time, take some photos of it, potentially bird clubs for beginners. Because another feature of it that was kind of cool is you could lock in where something was. So if you were looking at something, you could lock in on the image, and then even if you took it off, it would point you back in that direction. So I could be seeing something in the trees and trying to point it out, and no one can be understanding what I'm saying. You can lock in on it with the binoculars and then hand them to somebody else, and then they can find it using that. So it wasn't just identifying things, it wasn't just taking pictures. There are other features there too. And for all the flack that people in our comment section gave it, I did feel like it was Swarovski trying to integrate everything that people have been clamoring for. Everything that people have said, I wish this technology exists. I wish that technology exists. I feel like they threw it together in one thing, and it's their first iteration of it. I'm sure it'll improve. But I just thought it was kind of funny that it's a lot of stuff that we've said, oh yeah, that'd be so great. And then everyone is just, hating on it, which I thought was kind of silly.
Yeah, it is really interesting because it's not like they're being forced to buy it or use it or anything. And
Right. It's
it's
not like your tax dollars are going to the Swarovski invention.
no, and in my opinion, the target like audience for that product is probably retired birders who, they're just getting into the hobby and they want something that's, gonna be a camera and a binocular and it'll help lead them to some identifications. And even when we were there, I remember we were talking about the product, and one of the reps was like, "Oh yeah, that lady just bought one, like just on the spot, just like, yeah, I'm gonna take one of those." So, it's pretty crazy. But if you're not the target audience for a product, like you don't have to be mad at the product for existing. It's not like you have to buy it or interact with it or anything. I think it's really cool it exists. I'm curious to see where that technology is gonna go.
There's a
Um,
lot of things out there that sell for a lot more that do a lot less for you than those binoculars.
Yeah, and I'm sure as kind of that technology evolves, the price range will probably come down.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, that's just
Swarovski is
how it
pretty high
goes.
end stuff as well, though. So I mean, most of their stuff is pretty pricey,
Yeah,
but good
absolutely.
quality
But
as
to
well.
to what you're saying is other companies are going to see that, start trying to make that technology as well, and that's how the price is going to go down. So, soon you're going to have ones that maybe don't work as well, but they're cheaper, and that's kind of how the product is going to get honed to being better. So, like
Well,
I
I feel
said,
like for
first
people
iteration.
people that say, I feel like some people just want to say everything's diluting the hobby, like anything like, oh, it's gonna ruin such and such. Like I wonder if when the internet came around, they're like, oh, now people are gonna know where birds are. It's gonna ruin the hobby. Like you got to
Maybe.
just go out on your own and find your own birds.
I
Like
remember
people just
someone
love to
said
hate.
smart technology is making us dumber.
Ooh, revolutionary idea. I mean, to some degree, sure, like maybe, but I feel like all this stuff it's just tools. It's tools you can choose to use or not use.
Well, I think that this kind of stuff could potentially make you lazier, make you dumber, but you don't have to do that. It's just like the internet can make people lazier and dumber, but if you
And
use it
it
as a
has.
tool, well, yeah, I mean, with TikTok did major damage
I
in
know
that
you hate
front, but
TikTok.
yeah, I mean, I think
We do have a
anybody that
TikTok. You
likes
can follow us at
reason,
Badgerland Birding.
but I hate it. I hate that we have.
Along with that, we were talking about Merlin too. I mean, Merlin's been a huge help, but also controversial thing. That's where it's an app where you can turn it on. It'll identify birds by sound. It has other features too, but that's kind of the main one people talk about. And then we actually tested the Haiku box too. That's the device you put in your backyard, and it's supposed to identify the birds by sound and tell you what's in your backyard using BirdNet technology. And we actually found that to be kind of not super accurate. You could look at the songs and calls and be like, yeah, is that this? Is it not? And I feel like it wasn't correct as often as I was hoping it would be. And that's another thing I hope is going to get refined over time as well.
Yeah, I think the thing that has made me sad with a lot of the products is that if it worked perfectly, it would be fantastic. If the Haiku box was never wrong, it would be so cool to have and know exactly what's flying through your yard. And if the smart bird feeders were never wrong, and if the smart binoculars were never wrong, they would be such cool products, but they're just still not there yet with any sort of AI stuff that's going to tell you what it is with the correct identification 100% of the time. And that's kind of sad to me because I see a lot of advertisements for this stuff and it says, learn about what's in your yard, it identifies it for you. And I'm just like, oh no.
Do you think if it was never wrong, would it be boring? I feel like people, I kind of take pleasure in saying like, oh, that machine got it wrong, but I know it was a,
I don't think it would be
white-eyed
boring.
Vireo or something.
I don't think it would be boring. We talked too about nocturnal flight call recording too, because that sort of is in line with Haiku Box. There's more initiatives now to get nocturnal flight calls recorded, and I think there's some things that are actually allowing people to record them and then get that information analyzed, but that's not technically wrong. I mean, I guess it could still be human error, but I think if you review it yourself, you can fix any problems with it.
Well, I mean, that's kind of with everything. You can review it yourself and make sure that it's correct. I think what bothers people is that there are a lot of beginners or people that just don't know better that take what the AI says and like, I had this in my yard, or Merlin told me that this was here, that they don't
Right.
actually do their own research. That's where it comes to be a problem, is when people just take whatever the technology tells them and they're like, no, it's 100% true. That's where
Yeah, I
we're
mean, we
really
see that
running
all the
into
time,
issues.
identified by Merlin, yada, yada, yada. So it is definitely a challenge that was not needing to be dealt with 10 years ago, that now is a challenge. But we talk about it all the time. All this stuff is a tool. If you use Merlin, I'll say correctly, if you use it in the way where you don't let it make decisions for you, but you use it as a guide to what could be around, and then you do your own work, it's great. It helps tremendously. There's a
Say
lot
use
of
it
birds we found that way.
responsibly.
Yeah, use it responsibly. Treat it like alcohol.
Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. I can use the Merlin app.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Why do you
Um,
look so tired today? I was merlining all over town yesterday.
One thing with the haiku box is I was thinking it was gonna be a little more of a nocturnal flight call thing. I thought it would get more at night, and we really didn't see that. It was just mostly stuff during the day. But people that do the nocturnal flight call stuff, they can get some really cool things identified at night. I remember, was it our friend Ty Allen, who was on? He set up a little NFC station. He had some interesting things fly over his house.
Bill had some interesting things too.
Our friend Bill.
Hmm. Yep.
What did he have?
Now Bill Murray.
What did he have?
I don't remember, but I
Well, it couldn't
remember
have been that interesting
it
if you don't
wasn't as
remember.
interesting as some of the things he could have had, but I remember he listed a couple of the more fascinating ones. He said that they were actually trying to listen for Bicknell's thrush coming along the coast or
I
something
think
like
he
that.
said that his was supposed to be the control site where
Right.
they didn't hear any Bicknell's
Right.
thrushes. I
So
don't
the
think
hope
they
was that
did.
they didn't hear any, which they did not. But I remember there was some kind of rare-ish warblers. I think morning warbler was heard over his house.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. There wasn't anything that was super vagrant, but it was stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think was flying over a residential suburban house.
Yeah. What other technology would you like to see come into the forefront here?
So this
I'm
is
gonna
just a
check and just see if there's any other things we reviewed that we're
this is just
missing.
a personal thing for me, but talking about cameras, I really love our Panasonic Lumix FZ80s, and the only problem with it is that eventually, if you do a lot of zooming in and zooming out, which we do because we sometimes use it to identify things, the motor starts to go and you end up getting errors on the camera. I would love to see a specific birding camera that is a super zoom that takes high quality stuff that has a more durable motor so that you can use it for, 10 years so that you can use that same camera because the Panasonic Lumix is very close to that. I think they discontinued those though, didn't they?
I think Panasonic discontinued all their bridge cameras, which is
Yeah,
too
so I
bad.
would love that kind of bridge camera with just a stronger motor and can keep the super zoom and keep the image quality the same on the videos. That's what I would like to see. Something that's sort of in line with what the Visios are, where you can take pictures and use it to identify and actually see things with it. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, one that I'm seeing that we didn't talk about, but I didn't think was that great, was we had the Sfabani like scope camera adapter. So it's basically like a thing you put in your scope and then you could show the scope image on your phone. Which is kind of an interesting and innovative idea, but I thought it would depend on what type of scope you had and that it only worked with certain scopes. and then it was the thing you had to charge as well. So like it was cool, but I feel like you could use a super zoom camera and get something similar. But that was
Hmm.
another product we checked out. So the innovation is there, and I think it's because the market is there. Like there's a lot of people into backyard birding and birding, so the innovation is going to continue, I think, as companies look for different ways to stand out from the competition and make new innovative products.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other smart things that you think have yet to come out?
Well, one thing that kind of annoys me is I would love to live stream our rent house and just have it be, yeah, I have the box set up and we're just live streaming it to YouTube, but I haven't really found any smart product where you can just directly live stream it right to like a YouTube channel. So that's what I would like to see in those products, as well as making them more affordable because some of them can be pretty pricey. And then either using renewable, resources to build them, like we have the bamboo ones and stuff, although then they kind of break down over time, or using metal things that last longer. So just kind of making them better. And it was kind of funny with the smart hummingbird feeder that you tested. Didn't read the instructions and just put the sugar water right in. It all came out the flowers
That
onto
did
the chair
happen.
you were sitting on.
That is true.
So, making things foolproof,
I
working
mean, to be
on.
fair, it said in the
To be fair,
instructions not to fill it that way.
that's
So,
true. We definitely did not read the instructions, so
yeah.
we
So
should have
I
known
don't think
better.
we can blame that one on the company and say make that foolproof. I think, you read the
Well,
instructions, it
I
helps.
suppose, yeah. But just kind of optimizing that stuff. Things with stronger Wi-Fi connection so you can put it further away from your house.
I think it'd be really cool if this stuff could go without a Wi-Fi connection, if somehow it had something built in, like a built-in Wi-Fi connection, so that you could have it way far away from any sort of Wi-Fi. Because
Well,
I would
you
be
can
more
use it
curious
like
to
a
see what's
camera
out in the middle
trap,
of woods.
depending on the product.
Right, but I'm saying I would love to see what's just out in the middle of nowhere.
Like
You
have it
know,
be broadcast, like a
yeah,
long
exactly.
range.
Like set up a smart birdhouse out in the middle of the Kelmarine State Forest or something, or out in the middle of Yellowstone and then live stream it. That's what I would want.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'm sure there's stuff that we haven't even thought about that's going to come on the market and be like, whoa, that's a cool piece of technology.
I hope there's some rep out there listening to this, just writing down all our ideas.
Well, like I said, I would love to collaborate on like a birding camera or the ideal smart bird product or something like that. So if there is anyone that develops that stuff, it'd be fun to work on.
Nikon, we're looking at you. NetView, Bird Buddy.
So yeah, it'd be pretty cool. Anything else?
That's all I can pretty much think of for now, but I assure everybody that most likely when new products come available, we'll be out there testing them.
Yep, and the camera market's another whole nother thing too, where they're always coming out. I mean, they just came out with the mirrorless stuff. So they're making big strides in picture and things like that. Then you have the whole AI side of things that we talked about in the past. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how things go.
Indeed, it will. You're a camera guy now too. You know all sorts of different things about
I'm
cameras.
learning. I'm working on it. There's a lot to learn, which is pretty cool. So we'll call it a kind of an intro to the different bird and birding technologies, but it would be cool to see where it goes. So
Yeah, I think
thanks.
it's really combining people that love gear and technology with people that love nature now. So if you're somebody that wants to geek out over tech, there's a lot to look at now in the birding world.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Thanks to everyone for watching this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.